Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to We Were There. It's very nice having you with us. I am Judith Pucci, and I am a Tribute Museum walking tour guide, as are the two people sitting next to me. They are Anthony Palmieri and Cathy Langford. I'll leave it to you to figure out which one is which. And Cathy both lived and worked in Lower Manhattan on September 11th. Her apartment and office were across the street from the Trade Center. That was a great setup until September 11th. Anthony worked for the Department of Sanitation. He spent 9 months down here after the attacks, setting up blockades, cleaning out buildings, and washing down streets. He also spent time with everybody who was hauling away steel. So as you can see, our stories go beyond the historical events of the day because we've all had a personal connection to the attacks of September 11th. Our stories explore more of the personal costs of that day. And you're going to hear first from Cathy, so I'm just going to quickly set the scene for you. Not only were workplaces destroyed that day, the Trade Center was 7 buildings in total. The towers were the 2 famous ones. But there were thousands of people who lived down in Lower Manhattan at the time. Nowhere as many as now, but still, thousands of people. And these people had their homes just tossed up in the air. So some residents came back after the attacks. Some of them were able to come back several weeks later. Some didn't come back for a year later or longer. Cathy worked and lived down here, just across the street from the Trade Center, both. And she and her husband chose not to return after the attacks. And I'll let her take it from there.
Stand. Okay. Good afternoon. My September 11th was supposed to be a beautiful day. I was 30 years old. I wasn't a New Yorker. We're just coming on our 4th year of living in Manhattan. I was actually from Virginia, where I grew up. My husband was from Australia. So we were right in the middle of this great version of the American dream. We had gotten engaged back in Washington, D.C., gotten engaged 4 years ago, and he got this job offer in New York City. And I remember we didn't even think about it. It was like we were going. We were so excited. So we moved to New York City back on September 11th. It had been, our maybe 4th year, and we were so excited to be right below the World Trade Center because we had just moved into this new apartment. The apartment we were in before was a studio apartment. And if you don't know what a studio apartment is, it's 1 room. Your bedroom is your living room, and you have a kitchen and bathroom, but that's it. And we had 1 window. So we moved to this new place below the World Trade Center. We were so excited because it had 17 windows. We were like, this is big time. And out these windows was this great view of the World Trade Center. But what I mean by view was if you looked out our window, and we were on the 15th floor, you probably just saw the 30th floor of the World Trade Center. They were so big and so massive. You literally had to put your head out the window and turn up to see the tops of both towers. But it was great. Living down here was awesome. At the World Trade Center, it was more than just business places. There were farmers markets, there were concerts, there was a restaurant and bar on the top of the World Trade Center that we went to quite a bit. But September 11th, we woke up. I wasn't feeling well, so we decided we weren't going to go into work. And I remember standing in the kitchen, and I had a piece of toast on a plate. And I was just waiting for the butter to melt. It was really cold. And I felt the entire building shake. And I thought a bomb had gone off in our building. And we were 2 blocks south of the tower. So I yelled out to Guy. I said, a bomb. I said, a bomb went off. And then we looked out these beautiful windows, and we saw black smoke just pouring out of one of the towers. And we thought, oh my gosh. So we put the news on. We took some pictures. We thought, what's going on? They said a small plane hit. We thought, no. It was such a big gaping hole. And already, it was bad. Things were falling out. Things were on fire on the ground. There were bodies on the ground. So it wasn't long. We kind of just, still taking it all in. And then all of a sudden, we heard the jet engines of the second plane, way too fast, way too close, hit the second tower. And at that moment, my mind and my body went eerily still. I remember a guy yelled out to me, and he said, "Get dressed, we're getting out of here." I can still feel the weight of the tears that were coming down my face. We started packing a bag, but before we kind of gathered our stuff to run out, I made a phone call. I called my mom. And I remember she wasn't home, so I thought, why is she not home? It's 9 in the morning. I left her a message, and I said, "Mom," I said, "plane just hit the World Trade Centers." I said, "There are people, there are bodies everywhere." I said, "I think I'm in labor, and I don't know what to do." I was 9 months pregnant with my first child, and I didn't go to work that day because I thought I was in labor, and I thought I was going to have the baby that day. So we packed a bag, a backpack as quick as we could, and I remember I packed a little outfit. It was white with yellow ducks because we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. So we get to the bottom of the lobby, and guys like, "Let's go, we're going to a hospital, any hospital." And I say, "No, we can't leave," because there was so much stuff coming out of the towers, glass and metal, and it was just getting worse and worse because now both towers are on fire. But nobody knows what to do. We've never seen anything like this happen. So I feel better just to stay. I said, if we have to go to our hospital, we'll have to go north, we'll have to go around the towers and something will hit us, or, is it over yet? Are there more bombs or more planes coming? We didn't know what to do, so we waited. And as we're waiting, more people start coming into the lobby, not really knowing what to do. And then all of a sudden, we start hearing this horrible rumbling sound. It sounded like you were lying underneath a freight train. And I thought, okay, our building's been hit, it's coming down. And I remember a guy kind of put his arms over me, and we sort of braced for some kind of impact or thinking something is going to hit us. And I remember I said to him, I said, "I love you." And I said, "I'm sorry." And that moment, everything went completely black. The lights went off, and smoke and ash just filled the lobby. So people came running in, coated in ash. Still, we had no idea that one of the towers had fallen. We thought maybe the top had come off, but we really didn't know what happened. So again, now people are coming in, firefighters, people just covered in ash, really bewildered. We waited there for a while until someone said, "You should leave. We don't know if this building's safe. You really need to leave. There could be gas leaks." So we left coming out the west side highway. And when we got out, I remember just ash. And pretty much it was silent, except for maybe 1 or 2 sirens. And then all of a sudden, rumbling again. And someone yelled out, "Don't look back, just run south, run south." So we did. We got about 3 blocks, and a police officer sort of waved us into an apartment building, another apartment building. So we went in there where more people were gathering in a apartment. And there, again, we waited, and at that point, someone had the TV on, so we put the TV on, and we saw the towers come down, and then we saw the Pentagon had been hit. And I'm from Virginia, and that's where my family is. But when I heard they hit the Pentagon, I thought, wow, they really got us now, like the head of our military. So we waited there, kind of sinking in what was going on to our country. All of a sudden, someone said, "The paramedics are here, they're here." And I said, "Okay." They said, "We're here for the pregnant lady." And I raised my hand like a school child. I said, "That's me." So we got in the ambulance, and we made it to Beth Israel Hospital, where at that moment, I remember the doors of the ambulance sort of swung wide open, and there were all these people out, people in scrubs and white jackets, like waiting to help. And sadly, there really wasn't anybody to help. There were very few survivors who made it out of the towers. It was just us, and we could walk out. So by the time I saw the doctor, I remember the doctor said to me, she said, "Mrs. Langford, you're going to have the baby stay." She's like, she's like, "The baby is not in distress." But I remember I thought, I am in distress. And then she said, "You can stay here, or you can go to your planned hospital, or you could go to New Jersey or Staten Island and evacuate the city." And I thought to myself, I am not having this baby in New Jersey. So we left, and we walked up to our hospital, which was on 34th Street, Tisch, NYU. There I remember seeing the doctor that I had this great birthing plan for the day, but I saw him in the hospital. I remember he gave me a hug, and he didn't really say much, but it was when he was hugging me, he was saying, "It's okay," and I know. Many doctors had just stayed at the hospitals waiting, expecting lots of injuries and people to help, but there really weren't that many survivors or injured people to help. So at 3 a.m. on September 12th, we had a baby girl. We named that baby girl Grace, and she's here today in the audience. I know Grace was with us on that day in many ways. A little bit about Grace. She's kind, she's affectionate, she's really sweet, she's living life to the fullest, and she's living a beautiful life, and I just want to share that with you. Thank you.
Poor New Jersey. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that when you think of September 11th, I really doubt that you say, oh, the sanitation department, right? No, of course not. And yet, thousands of New York City sanitation workers were here 24 hours a day for 9 months, which is how long it took to clear away what used to be the World Trade Center. Sanitation workers made an essential contribution to this city in helping us get up off our knees and back up and functioning. And Anthony was very much part of that.
Thank you, Judith. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Tribute Museum, thank you for being here today. It's my honor to speak with you. So I'm going to ask, how many of you are old enough to remember September 11th, 17 years ago? Just a few months, I would never say it that way. I'd say, how many remember? But now, as people coming up, she has a daughter 17 years old, and that's when she was born. So there's a younger generation coming up. Well, as for me, on September 11th, I was working for Disney. Now, I hope you're not thinking I'm talking about the Mickey Mouse Disney. I'm talking about the Department of Sanitation, New York, DSNY, that Disney. And we are known as New York's strongest. On Tuesday morning, September 11th, my partner Joe and I were working just a few miles up from here, and someone passed us and said, "Did you hear that a plane hit the World Trade Center?" At first, like many New Yorkers, we just thought it was a very terrible accident. But 17 minutes later, when the second plane hit the World Trade Center number 2, the South Tower, we knew this couldn't be an accident. And I really believe that was the moment that September 11th changed my life forever. Shortly after that, we were all sent home. The following morning, when I reported to work, there was talk between the sanitation union and the city about sending a group of sanitation workers to the World Trade Center site. As soon as they asked for volunteers, I signed up. We were known as the Emergency Response Division, ERD. You know, I'll never forget the very first day I stepped foot onto this site. My eyes were looking at the collapsed tower, but somehow my brain, it just didn't believe it. But I remember thinking to myself, if this is real, we're going to be here for 10 years just cleaning up. While I was working here, I drove a truck, perhaps, over the very spot you are sitting in right now. And I helped remove 1.8 million tons of steel and debris, some of which could have contained human remains. I used a fire hose to wash down buildings and streets that were covered with thick layers of ash. Every store, every restaurant that you passed on your way here today needed to be cleaned of rotting food and waste. And when you add that to the more than 100,000 workers that were here that needed to be fed each and every day, it simply created tons and tons of garbage. As I speak to you now, I could still smell what it was like back then. There was one very smoke-filled morning when I was cleaning up near the pile. Without warning, we heard these 3 very loud horn blasts. It was so loud it was almost deafening. It was like Gabriel came up to blow his horn. A second later, there was total silence. All the work had stopped, no equipment running, no movement at all. Unfortunately, that silence meant they found someone's body or body part. Over the next several weeks, I would hear that sound many more times. Later that week, I was cleaning up on Church Street, right around the corner here. And once again, Gabriel stood up and blew his horn very, very loud. And this time I turned towards the pile and I watched a group of firefighters wrap their brother in American flag and they gently carried him down off the pile, much like pallbearers would do at a funeral holding a casket. As they made their way closer to where I was standing, I wanted to salute this hero. I needed to let him know he will never be forgotten. Instead, I just froze there, not knowing what to do, and to be honest, not knowing if I even had the right to salute him. I simply watched as they carried him off to a temporary morgue that was right here on Liberty Street. As they walked away, I felt completely empty inside. And to this day, I very much regret not saluting him. About an hour later, one of the fire chiefs came by and called out my name. And he says, "Can you follow me?" And when we got to Liberty Street, right near that morgue, my heart was beating very fast. A few moments later, the fire chief, he walked out of the morgue, and he handed me what was left of a firefighter's uniform. His pants, bunker coat, Scott pack, mask. And he says, "Could you please throw these away?" You know, I stood there holding them for a few seconds, just not knowing what to do. To me, the very thought of taking this hero's uniform, putting it in a garbage truck it was so disrespectful. But in reality, after I threw it away, it was such a small sacrifice on my part compared to the sacrifice he just gave. I gently placed everything in the bottom of the hopper, and I pulled the handle truck. As I speak to you now, I could still smell the stench of death as I watched his uniform disappear deep into the truck, much like he disappeared on September 11th. For me, that was the hardest job I had during the 9 months I spent here at Ground Zero. And at the time, I felt it was the single worst thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. But you know, they say when a cloud follows you, sunshine will definitely follow. And for me, that came on May 30th, 2002. 9 months after the attack of the World Trade Center, a 36-foot-tall, 58-ton piece of steel known as the last column was removed from the Ground Zero pit in a very heartfelt ceremony to mark the end of the rescue, recovery, and cleanup of the World Trade Center site. Covered with the American flag, the last column was proudly marched from the bottom of the pit to the top of the ramp right here on West Street, followed by the New York City Police Department, the New York City Fire Department, family members, volunteers, people just like you, construction workers, and members of the New York City Department of Sanitation. It was my proudest moment, one that I will never forget. As we continued marching up the ramp and down West Street, all the remaining heroes from September 11th were cheering, clapping, crying, simply saying thank you. It was the most humbling yet gratifying feelings I think I've ever had in my entire life. And today, not only will you see the last column when you go downstairs in the museum, but you also have the honor of sitting in the middle of Ground Zero, where it all took place. As I look back over these past 17 years, I stand before you as a very humble man. But I say to all of them, and today I'd like to say to all of you, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be part of September 11th, its history, and thank you for allowing me to tell my story. It was truly an honor, and I will never forget.
Before we wrap up, I just want to say something about the fact that September 11th, even though it's 17 years since the attacks, the reality of that day is very real every single day for many families. This city is now approaching a terrible milestone. We are very close to now 10,000 people having contracted forms of cancer because of their exposure to the toxins that came from the dust and the elements that were in the pile from Ground Zero. Men and women who were here during those 9 months, working on the pile, removing debris that was the Trade Center, looking for remains, they breathed all of that in. There were toxins, there were carcinogens, there was asbestos in the towers. That is extraordinarily unhealthy material, and they have been ill. And we're at the point where, as I said, we're approaching 10,000 people with cancer because of that exposure. We have 1,700 people who have died because of that exposure. These deaths are going to continue for years. At this point, 3 to 5 cancer deaths, 3 to 5 cancers are announced every single week, new cancers. So these will continue for years and years. And then, of course, they will stop. And that is because this community then will be gone. So September 11th is anything but over. And the last thing I would like to say to all of you is thank you. You chose to spend some of your time with us, and it is appreciated. So thank you all very much. And if you should have any questions, the 2 of them will be right outside the exit, and we'll be very happy, both Kathy and Anthony, to speak with you and answer any questions you may have.